Hello Internet. I've been wanting to do a series of videos on the Exorcist franchise for quite a while now, and it's been ticking over in my head. The problem has always been that you have to start with the first film, and what is there left to say about one of the greatest horror movies ever made? It would be an absolute waste of time to do a review of a movie that, if you're watching this video, you already know why it's so great. So, if you will indulge me for part one, I'd like to talk about the film and the novel from a personal perspective. I think it's fair to say that our relationship with this movie here in the UK is through the intervention of the censors. It's been a very different kind of relationship than our cousins in America had. The movie was released here in 1974, one year before I was born, and in 1985 the Video Recordings Act was passed into law, which meant that every home release of a movie had to have a certification. The Exorcist was withdrawn. It was denied certification. So it wasn't banned. The film was never banned in this country. It was just effectively banned. It could still be screened at cinemas, and I imagine it probably was on a semi-regular basis. It's just that if you're a kid like me, you hear about this movie and you can't ever get to see it. It wasn't until James Furman retired as the head of the BBFC, British Board of Film Classification, in 1999 that the movie was submitted for certification and passed without cuts. If you're at all interested in this very strange period of the BBFC, Google Video Nasties or Video Nasties UK. There's an excellent documentary about it, which you'll be able to find, and it wasn't our finest hour as far as the UK and censorship goes. And I'm just going to flat out say it was censorship and put it out there. The upshot of this for a horror fan is that The Exorcist became a film to whisper about. It became a holy grail to attain. And you would hear rumour of someone who knew someone who knew someone who had a copy of The Exorcist, and it was a rite of passage to get your hands on this movie and to see it. The downside is that when I finally got to see it for the first time, round about 1992, it was a VHS copy of a VHS copy of a VHS copy. It was not the ideal circumstances with which to view the film. Previous to that, though, I found out quite a long time previous to that, I'm not slow, that it was based on a novel by William Peter Blatty. And I can still remember the day I got my hands on this copy of The Exorcist, the first copy I've ever bought, the only copy I've ever had. I don't know if the camera will pick up quite how yellowed these pages are. So as soon as I got hold of this, I felt like I had a secret treasure map. Contained in these pages was the story of this film that I wasn't allowed to see. And I'm actually really glad that it came about that way round. Book first, film afterwards. I don't think on my first reading as a kid I really understood the intricacies of this book at all. It meant that revisiting it was an absolute joy. And it's a book that continues to give up its treasures. One of the recurring things I'm hoping to put into these reminiscences on the Exorcist franchise is just how much William Peter Blatty's work cross-pollinates. Ideas in The Exorcist will crop up or be explored further in his novel Legion, or in The Exorcist 3, or his movie The Ninth Configuration. I was really surprised, just doing a little bit of prep for this, to find that Pazuzu is named twice in the first few pages of the novel, the prologue, the Northern Iraq section. I had become over the years convinced that Pazuzu, the name Pazuzu, was an invention of whichever one of the many cooks spoiled the broth of the script for Exorcist 2. But no, Pazuzu's named in the novel. He's named in the script for The Exorcist. The name is just never uttered. Also in the novel, in the archaeological dig in northern Iraq at the start of the novel that Lancaster Merrin is at, it is only the Pazuzu head that is uncovered, whereas in the film, along with it in the same cache of objects, is a medallion of Saint Joseph, which shouldn't be there. And so there's this strange sort of transcendent evidence right at the start of the movie that's not present in the book, and medallions, and especially medallions where they're not supposed to be, will recur, but we'll get onto that in part 2. There's a lot more Kinderman in the novel than there is in the movie, and William Kinderman, the police lieutenant, is a character that I love. We see a lot more of his investigation, so it marries very, very nicely with his sequel novel Legion, which is more focused on Kinderman, but again, that's for another part. If you'll allow me another personal rumination on the film, I was born and raised within the Catholic Church, so as a younger kid, as a teenager, seeing the movie for the first time and reading the book, the stuff that really grabbed me was the demonic possession, the sense of evil and dread, and all that kind of stuff that seeps into your bones when you've been going to church every Sunday from a child upwards into adulthood, and go to a Catholic primary school and the like. So my first relationship with this story and this movie was all of that supernatural horror and dread, and the film really delivers on the whispers and the rumour and the grapevine of this banned film. It actually gives everything you want it to give. The Exorcist single-handedly is responsible for a slew of possession and exorcism movies, and straight to DVD possession titles that continues to this day. The godfather of all of them, though, The Exorcist still remains head and shoulders above all of them. As I grew older, tussled with my faith, questioned the teachings of the church, and eventually left, rejected them, my relationship with this story changed. If anything, I came to love it more. There's an existential dread that runs through this movie, and this is Damien Karras and the wonderful performance by Jason Miller, with him struggling against his faith, the loss of his mother, the questioning. He's the real existential heart of this, and the ultimate cosmic horror that hangs over him, the possibility and the belief that this is all there is. Once we're dead, we're dead. There are no benevolent gods, and we are, as Kinderman puts it in Exorcist 3, waltzing blindly through the universe. This is my connection with the film now, and this film is so layered that you can approach it from many different angles. I love the balance of the scientific and the spiritual, and all of this is embodied in Karras's character, who is a Jesuit priest who then trains to be a psychiatrist, and that knotty little issue of whether possession is real or not, or whether it is mental illness or mental conditions and the like. Now, obviously, the film's called The Exorcist, and within this, possession is real, but it walks a really nice tightrope for a while, and it's a really grown-up approach to the subject matter. It's of course there's vomiting and head turning and things like that, but this is such a measured and adult approach to all of the themes and the subject material that this is why a film that's now, what, 40 years old plus, still resonates, is still the absolute template and perfect example of how to do a possession movie. Since 2000, there are now two versions of this film: the original theatrical cut and the version you've never seen, which I really don't like that title. It sounds really clumsy to me. On my Blu-ray it's called the extended director's cut, which sounds a hell of a lot better. It's still slightly clumsy, but there are a couple of really interesting there's loads of interesting extras on the DVDs and the Blu-ray, one specifically about the two different versions, with William Friedkin, the director, and William Blatty, the author, talking about why, arguing for and against the inclusion or not. Probably the most famous inclusion, the most tabloidy inclusion, is the spider walk sequence, and photos of that would appear in Fangoria magazine and Gorzone magazine, and your mind would, as a young kid, go crazy at this girl walking backwards down the stairs, and you're just trying to picture what that would be like. That's the more showbizy element of it. I'm not a big fan of the spider walk sequence. I actually don't think it needs to be in there. There are most of the scenes included are much more low-key and much more considered. And the most successful, to my mind, is the ending of the film. With the original cut, it ends with Father Dyer at the top of the stairs, looking down to where his friend Damien died, and it ends on a fairly somber note. With the extended cut, there's a few more minutes, and Dyer is talking to Kinderman in a scene that very closely, by design, mirrors a conversation that Kinderman had with Karras earlier on. And because Exorcist 3 now exists and Legion now exists, that I love that slightly more upbeat, slightly more hopeful tail off. It interlinks like a couple of railroad carriages now perfectly into 15 years later, the continuing story. The key scene that was cut out and put back in, and Friedkin quite freely admits that he did the extended cut because he felt he owed it to Blatty to give him the cut that he's wanted for decades. Money probably had something to do with it as well, but we can skim over that. We can allow these guys to double dip on one of the greatest movies ever made. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But the key scene that actually personally hurt Blatty at his exclusion was a scene between Karras and Merrin on the staircase outside Reagan's room during a pause in the ritual, where Karras asks, "Why this girl? Why attack this girl? It doesn't make sense." And Merrin verbalizes that ultimately the girl isn't the target. Everyone around her is the target, and the ultimate aim is to make everyone who is witness to this despair and to completely reject the possibility that God could ever love us, that humans are filth and that we're animals. Friedkin cut it, I think, correctly, because his argument was that the entire rest of the film tells you that, and so you don't need two characters sitting there and saying what the entire film says. But Blatty felt that it was actually the heart and soul of the film, and I'm really glad that he got his version as close to restored as possible. It's a nice scene. It's always good to have extra Max von Sydow and Jason Miller together. It's a very short scene, but it's there now if you want to see it. The addition to the extended cuts that I really see no purpose for is right at the very start of the movie. Now, the first shot is the house in Georgetown and a shot of an interior of the church and a statue of Mary. Then it goes into the credits. Then we fade to the Iraqi sunrise. I so wish that hadn't been put back in, because again, with the interconnections, Exorcist 3 that Blatty wrote and directed, the final shot of that film is sunset over Georgetown, and the image of sunrise and sunset just perfectly bookends those two films. And if you want to watch The Exorcist and then watch its one and only true sequel, you watch Exorcist and Exorcist 3, and it just tickles me that the first film starts with a sunrise and the final film, the second film, ends with a sunset. To me, that's perfect. So the theatrical cut will always be my favourite cut of The Exorcist, even though if I could tinker, I'd have the theatrical cut plus the extra end bit of the extended cut and not much else extra. There's an additional scene with Chris McNeil and the doctors where they're doing some tests on Reagan, which I guess is kind of nice. It shows a slower progression of her illness or possession. But yeah, I'm being a whiny little fanboy and wanting my own personal cut of things. In my head, I've got my perfect cut of the film. So when I watch the theatrical cut, I'll add in the final scene at the end. But that's just me. I said this was going to be personal, so I apologise. So whilst I can't add anything to the hours of video reviews and pages and pages and pages and pages of written reviews and critiques and studies of The Exorcist, I'd like to just finish off by going over a few little things that I noticed this time round, and that's the wonder of home cinema and being able to pause and move frame by frame. So these might interest you, they might not. They say to me that there's strata to this film, and there are treasures to be dug out of it if you want to find them. The first instance is an instance of me misremembering. I'd always assumed that the medallion that is found in the Iraqi dig is the St. Christopher's medallion. I don't know where I got that from in the film. It's actually St. Joseph, and it's a Latin inscription, and it says Sancte Joseph ora pro nobis, and I looked that up, and it means pray for us. The next little thing I noticed, so you could call these subliminal messages if you understood Latin. That would be subliminal. Perhaps even more subliminal, you need to understand Japanese for this one. But if you remember, when Karas wants to get a recording of Reagan to find proof that she's speaking in a language she couldn't have any knowledge of, and actually gets her speaking English in reverse, she takes it to the language centre. So then there's one scene at the language centre where he's playing it to this guy who's studied the tapes, and it being a language centre, there's a poster above them with a word on it that is, where did I write it down? Tasukete. That now my Japanese is non-existent, so if you're Japanese and watching this, I apologise for my pronunciation, but I googled that as well. That's Japanese for help. Now, I love that. I absolutely love that. That to me is subliminal. The other thing I picked up on, which I adore, is when Damien's mother is hospitalized by his uncle, her brother, and he goes to visit her. His uncle is giving him grief about the conditions she's living in, and says that they found her talking to her radio. Now that in and of itself, within the context of the film, means one thing. It means maybe she's dementia is coming on. In the context of watching that with Exorcist 3 and the novel Legion, boy, it means something else altogether, and is mind-blowing to me that a little seed planted in The Exorcist returns in Exorcist 3. You want to know another mind-blowing little seed before I leave you? Page 1 of The Exorcist, and this is Merrin's thoughts. The little trinkets that he's found on the dig, the brittle remnants of cosmic torment that once made him wonder if matter was Lucifer upward groping back to his God, and yet now he knew better. Page 1 of The Exorcist and the final page of its sequel, Legion, discuss exactly the same idea. This kind of synergy and Blatty's mastery over his storytelling and his cross-pollination is something that endlessly fascinates me about this. As we continue on, what we will discover, and this is not going to be any spoiler to you, is that any aspect of the franchise that William Peter Blatty has had a hand in is superb. Anything else is diabolical. So, to leaven the bread a little for part 2 of this look at the franchise, we're going to have to look at Exorcist 2, The Heretic, and we're going to look at where it went wrong. But we're also going to look at The Ninth Configuration, written and directed by William Peter Blatty, and in a strange, non-official kind of way, not a sequel to The Exorcist, but, if such a word even exists, a sidequel, a sort of parallel story that may or may not be in the same universe. We'll talk about that in the other video, but thematically, certainly within the same cosmos. So thank you for bearing with me while I talk about The Exorcist, because I know you all know that it's great already. And hopefully you'll join me in looking at Exorcist 2 and also The Ninth Configuration.